What if the biggest royal power struggle wasn't happening in public, but behind palace doors, hidden inside a routine press release? A single document may have revealed a quiet battle over influence, loyalty, and the future of the monarchy, leaving one of its most senior figures feeling erased without a single public confrontation. But how much of this story is fact? How much is palace speculation? And what really happened behind the scenes? Stay with me until the end as we separate the confirmed events from the claims and uncover why this controversy has sparked so much debate. And before we begin, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from today, if you'd like? I can also make it more dramatic, more documentary style, or more neutral and fact-focused. It started with a press release, the kind that slides out of the palace on a Tuesday morning like any other piece of official housekeeping. Streamlining, realignment of duties, greater efficiency, modernization. The words were chosen carefully, the way they always are when the institution wants something to sound routine. Camilla read it at the same time the rest of the country did. Nobody rang her the night before. Nobody walked down a corridor to prepare her. A woman married to the king for 20 years, living in his houses, working with staff paid from the same accounts, found out she was being cleared out of her own diary by opening a webpage. That detail sits heavier than anything that followed. You do not accidentally forget to warn the queen consort that her schedule is about to be emptied. In a building where 3 people check the wording of a birthday message, silence like that is never an oversight. Somebody decided she would discover it this way. Somebody senior signed it off, and the decision to tell her nothing was itself the message. She sat with the document and watched her name disappear from the places it had belonged. Key state functions, diplomatic briefings, high-profile events she had carried for more than a decade, long-standing patronages quietly reassigned, some to Catherine, some to younger faces the public could barely name, events rebranded under someone else or canceled outright. A patronage is not decoration. A royal name on a letterhead brings real money in donations and opens doors that stay shut otherwise. Handing those over is handing over power. Everyone who touched that document knew exactly what they were moving. None of it required her permission. All of it was done in a paper she never saw until it was public. Staff inside Clarence's house later described her reaction as volcanic. One account has her saying 6 words that cut through everything else. After everything I've done, he does this. Not they, not the palace, not the household, he. She knew who had done it before she finished the first page. And she has not been wrong about that building once in 50 years of reading it. The he was William. This family has done a version of this before. In the years before 1997, another woman inside the institution watched her diary thin out, her name come off things, her position quietly rearranged by people who never said any of it to her face. That woman eventually told her story to a camera, and the damage is still being paid off 3 decades later. Everybody currently sitting in that palace grew up inside those consequences. They know what happens when someone is managed out in silence. They did it anyway. The restructured document had been circulating internally for months. It was described as a comprehensive strategy for modernizing royal functions. Charles had seen drafts. He had signed off on portions of it. According to insiders, he did not fully grasp what it meant for his wife. That claim does convenient work for a lot of people. It is possible that a man in his late 70s, managing a cancer diagnosis announced in February 2024, read a strategy paper about patronage allocation without mapping every consequence onto his marriage. It is also exactly what you would say afterwards if you had understood perfectly well and did not want to be the one who told her. Nobody outside the family knows which version is true. His actions in the days that followed say more than any briefing. By lunchtime on the day the release went wide, Camilla had requested a private audience with her husband. Not with William, with Charles. What happened in that room was, by every account that has reached anyone, explosive. She held the documents up in front of him like evidence and asked whether he had known. Charles hesitated. That hesitation is the entire marriage in one beat. He did not say no. He did not say yes. He took a moment to calculate which answer would cost him less. She has spent 50 years reading that man's face. She had her answer before he opened his mouth. Then she said the thing that had been waiting inside her for 2 decades. She called it a betrayal. She reminded him she had stood with him when they spat on her name, when they called her a witch. She asked whether she was simply being dropped now that the work was done. Charles tried to frame it as strategy, William taking on more leadership, structural decisions rather than personal ones, the natural order of a transition. She did not accept a word of it. She could see William's handwriting on every page, whether his name was printed there or not. A second meeting was arranged. 3 people this time, Charles, Camilla, and William. She walked into that room cold, not upset. Cold. She was not there to plead. She was there to say it to his face. She told William he was depriving her of responsibilities she had earned, not inherited, not married into, earned. That distinction matters to her more than almost anything else in the room. Every other person present was born into their standing. She is the only one who had to build hers from nothing, while the entire country worked against her. William did not flinch. He answered quietly, which is worse than shouting, and he knows it. He told her it was about the future, that the public wants a monarchy representing the coming generation, that he is preparing for that none of it was designed to penalize her. Then he used a word that has lingered ever since: clarity. He said the changes were about clarity. Camilla answered with the only real card she still held. She told him he is not king yet. And if he thought she would go quietly, he did not understand her at all. That was not theater. She was naming the actual position. William is not king. Charles is still on the throne, alive and sitting in that room. Everything William was doing that afternoon depended on his father continuing not to stop him. And Charles, by multiple accounts, sat through the whole exchange pale and exhausted and visibly torn, saying very little. Afterwards, aides muttered that the king appeared to have lost control of his own court. That is a brutal sentence for staff to say out loud about a reigning monarch. It got said. The meeting ended with nothing. No apology, no reversal, no compromise. Camilla walked out first. William left second, by every description entirely unaffected. Charles stayed in the room alone for about an hour. One member of palace staff later called it the day the throne cracked. Not publicly. Behind the doors, you could feel it. To understand why the blow landed with such force, you have to look at what Camilla had actually built, because almost nobody gives her credit for the size of it. Camilla Rosemary Shand was never meant to wear a crown. No royal blood. No pedigree that counted next to the Windsors. No media training. No machinery assembled around a girl being prepared for that role. For most of her life, she was the woman the institution wished would simply disappear. She met Charles in the 1970s, years before Diana, years before the scandal that would define them all, and the two of them formed a bond at once. The establishment took one look and decided against her. Too experienced, too independent, too much her own person. In that world, those words were never compliments. Charles was steered towards someone more suitable, and that someone was Lady Diana Spencer. Everything that followed became the most famous marriage collapse of the 20th century. The part that matters here is the damage it did to Camilla specifically. She became the villain of a story broadcast to the entire planet. The other woman, the mistress, the one who broke a fairy tale a great many people needed to believe was true. Photographers chased her. Newspapers took her apart week after week. Bread was thrown at her in a supermarket car park. That actually happened. And it is worth remembering whenever anyone describes her as someone who has had an easy ride. Through all of it, she stayed silent. That is the detail that keeps returning. She never sat down with a broadcaster. She never authorized a friendly biography. She never briefed a journalist against Diana. Never went on the record. Never once tried to explain herself to a country that had already decided. She waited. That was the entire strategy, and it was the correct one. As the marriage came apart and the truth about all 3 of them grew clearer, Camilla did not crumble. She adapted. She did charity work nobody photographed. She kept her head down. She stayed close to Charles and let the years grind public anger down into something duller. It worked. Not quickly and not easily, but it worked. They finally married in April 2005 at Windsor Guildhall. The public reaction came back wary rather than hostile, which after that history was close to a miracle. She took the title Duchess of Cornwall and deliberately declined Princess of Wales, because Princess of Wales meant Diana and would always mean Diana. That decision shows exactly how politically literate she had become. She was entitled to the title. She read the room and refused it, and the choice bought her roughly a decade of fragile goodwill. Behind the doors, her position expanded the whole time. She became one of Charles's most useful advisors. Staff who worked with her described the same woman again and again. Sharp, politically aware, willing to tell him things nobody else in the building would say to his face. She was not a supportive spouse standing half a step behind. She was a strategist, and he relied on her. Over the years, she took on more duties, collected patronages, built a working operation of her own, and eventually earned something almost nobody expected: the quiet approval of Elizabeth. The late Queen recognized someone who had endured a great deal and grown into the role rather than demanding it. By the time Charles came to the throne in September 2022, Camilla was not a footnote in his reign. She was Queen Consort. She was crowned in Westminster Abbey in May 2023 with a country that had more or less made its peace with her. 50 years. That is what it took her. 50 years from being told she was unsuitable to standing in that abbey with a crown placed on her head. There was one more thing she wanted, and she never asked for it out loud. People close to her say she hoped her own family, particularly her grandchildren, would be brought properly into the fold. Not titles. She was never foolish enough to ask for titles. She wanted an institution that acknowledged she had left a legacy rather than merely occupied a position. Nobody ever refused that request. Nobody discussed it either. It was simply allowed to sit unanswered year after year, until the answer became obvious by silence. Then Charles's health turned. William's role expanded. The future she thought she had helped build began to be redrawn by people who were not asking her opinion. And the way Catherine was positioned through all of this is what turned a restructure into something that felt personal. While Camilla was raging behind closed doors, the Princess of Wales rose quietly, gracefully, and with a precision outsiders keep mistaking for luck. To the public, she is the future king's wife. Composed, popular, extremely good at the job. Inside the palace, people had worked out some time earlier that Catherine was not simply ascending. She was being placed. Camilla watched it happen in real time, and she had been watching Catherine for years before that. Commoner to Duchess to Princess of Wales, always composed, always liked, and never once encroaching on the Queen Consort's ground. That changed the moment Charles took the throne. With the king absorbed by the demands of the job and William pushing further into leadership, a gap opened in who the public actually sees. Catherine filled it without appearing to try. She started appearing more often, frequently on her own, and with noticeably more weight attached to each appearance. Charities that had been Camilla's for years were reallocated to the Princess of Wales under the heading of modernizing causes. Her remarks grew more authoritative. Her clothes became more deliberate. Every element of her presence edged slightly more formal, slightly more sovereign. One senior courtier put it as plainly as anybody inside that building ever does. "There is a new energy around Catherine," he said. "It is not an accident. Every photograph, every comment, every event is orchestrated. She is being promoted." The press followed because the press always follows. Headlines shifted from Queen Camilla attends to Princess Catherine leads. Once that change happens in the language, the rest is finished. The narrative had moved, and Camilla was losing more than her diary. She was losing her place in the frame. The worst of it for her was not that Catherine was winning. It was that William was clearly the one making it happen. He made sure Catherine was central at state gatherings. He handed her the high-visibility work. Every appearance the two of them made together, the coordination, the ease, the whole presentation, said youth and unity and continuity. and it said it directly at the expense of the two people standing next to them. Then the murmuring began among staff and eventually in the press that William regards Catherine rather than Camilla as the real queen-in-waiting, not in title, in symbolism, in influence, in whose face the public will picture when the next reign is discussed. Work out what that means for Camilla. Whenever Charles's reign ends, the country will already have been trained to see somebody else in the role. She will be a paragraph, someone from the previous era. William's argument deserves to be stated properly, because a flat villain helps no one and his case is stronger than his manners. He is not doing this because he dislikes his stepmother. He is doing it because he watched this institution take his mother apart in public over a period of years, while everyone inside the building told each other they were protecting something. He came out of that with one conviction: the crown survives on being wanted rather than on being owed. Anyone standing in the photograph who costs the public a moment of hesitation is a liability the institution cannot afford in a century where it has to justify itself every year. He is right about the mechanics. That is the uncomfortable part. In 15 years, nobody under 40 will be able to explain who Camilla is without a 2-minute preamble about events from before they were born. Every appearance she makes until then spends a little of the goodwill William is trying to bank for his own reign. He has run the numbers, and the numbers say remove her. Everything after that is execution. The machinery around the removal was close to airtight. Every time a story about Camilla's shrinking presence started to gather momentum, something else arrived to take the oxygen. Catherine at a children's hospital, George at a new engagement, a family photograph released at exactly the right hour. The press cooperated because the press needs content, and that is content. The public largely did not notice. There was one afternoon in all of this that does the whole thing in about 4 seconds of footage. A reception, cameras present, the usual arrangement. Camilla arrived and took the position she has taken at 1,000 of these events, slightly to the side and half a step back, where a consort stands. Catherine came in afterwards and went to the center because that was the position she had been given. The photographers turned, not rudely and not all at once. They simply rotated the way a room of professionals does when it works out where the picture is. For about 4 seconds, Camilla stood in a room full of lenses with none of them pointed at her, holding the same expression she has held through 30 years of considerably worse, while a woman 40 years younger did the job she used to do 6 feet away. Nobody said anything to her. Nobody was unkind. She simply stopped being the photograph in public, in real time, and she stood there and let it happen because there is no version of reacting to that which does not make it worse. Silence does not stop a story. Silence only removes the palace from it. The story continues perfectly well without any official contribution, assembled out of diaries, photographs, and absences by people with an internet connection and a great deal of time. Social media noticed first, which is where these things always start now. Royal watchers went through the palace website and found Camilla's profile revised and her name missing from sections it had occupied for years. People started tracking canceled events and putting the lists side by side. Threads went up comparing where she was standing at last year's engagements to where she was standing this year, and then to whether she was in the photograph at all. The official outlets said nothing about any of it. That was the strategy. Say nothing. Release something shiny on the days it grows loud and let it burn out. It was a narrative war, and for several months William was comfortably winning it. Palace communications had gone through months of this without confirming a single fact. Not one on-the-record sentence about the diary, the patronages, or the Queen's absence from anything. Journalists who have covered that family for 20 years were getting the same 4 words back every time they asked. That works right up until one person inside decides it should not. Then somebody leaked, and the whole thing turned over in a weekend. An unidentified palace aide told a major Sunday newspaper that Camilla had confronted Charles in tears, wanting to know why she was being pushed out of the inner circle. The story did not detonate because it was salacious. There is nothing salacious in it. It detonated because it confirmed something a lot of people had already half assembled on their own. Confirmation is far more powerful than revelation. Everybody had been looking at an empty chair for months. Somebody finally said out loud that she had not chosen to leave it. The queen consort had not stepped back. She had been pushed. Once that sentence existed in print, the blackout was finished. Commentators who had been carefully not asking started asking. Somebody wanted to know about the state banquet and her absence from it. Somebody else wanted to know how Catherine had ended up with so many of her appearances. And everybody wanted to know why the palace had refused to clarify a single thing about any of it for months when clarifying would have taken a paragraph. The family that has spent 3 years selling stability was back in the same position it has occupied every decade since the 70s, with the papers running internal warfare stories and the press office saying nothing. Only this time Diana was not at the center of it. Camilla was. And if you have followed this family for any length of time, that is an almost unbearable irony, because the machinery now being pointed at her is the same machinery she survived by outlasting it. Clarity, that is the word William used, and everything makes sense once you understand what his people mean by it. They are not talking about communication. They are talking about a monarchy that is small, young, and carries no baggage. A monarchy where every single face in the photograph supports the brand rather than complicating it. Nothing that needs explaining. Nothing that forces a producer to add a caption about who somebody is and what happened in 1995. One royal source put it as bluntly as anybody has. William views the monarchy as a business. Each face represents the brand. He wants it clean, young, and free of scandal. Camilla does not suit the picture. That is not about disliking her. The easy version of this story is that a stepson resents his stepmother, and that is not what is happening. This is about control, and about a man who watched what happened to his mother inside this institution, and decided that the only way to protect the thing is to run it like an operation rather than a family. He knows what modern media does. He knows the crown survives on relevance rather than sentiment. He has done the arithmetic and worked out that in 15 years nobody under 40 will be able to explain who Camilla is or why she matters, and that every photograph she stands in until then costs him a small amount of the clean, simple story he is trying to build. So he started removing her from the photographs. Then comes the part almost nobody has picked up on. The title itself, he never took it. There was no proclamation, no letters patent revoked, no announcement, no legal instrument of any kind. Camilla is queen officially, formally, completely. Today, right now, she holds every title she held the day before that press release went out. That was a decision. It was not an oversight and it was not mercy. Think about what actually taking the title would have required. Stripping a queen consort of her title means parliament, or at minimum, a public constitutional process with lawyers and a paper trail and weeks of coverage. It means Charles standing in the middle of it being asked to choose in public between his wife and his son. It means front pages for a month. And it means something far worse than any of that from William's point of view. It hands Camilla the one thing she has never had in 50 years of this, which is public sympathy. Take a title off a 75-year-old woman who has done the job quietly for 20 years and you do not diminish her. You turn her into a victim. Half the country that has spent decades unable to warm to her would have discovered overnight that they did not much like watching an old woman being humiliated by a man 40 years younger with all the power in the room. He left her the word and took everything the word does. The patronages, the state functions, the diplomatic briefings, the visibility, the staff pipeline, the place in the frame. He removed every single thing the title was for and left the title sitting on top of it. The result is a woman who is technically the second most senior person in the monarchy and has nothing at all to do on a Wednesday. That is why the answer to why he did it is genuinely uncomfortable once you see it. He did not fight her. Fighting her would have made her real. He made her ceremonial, which in that institution is another word for finished. And he did it without ever giving her anything to push back against. There is no document to appeal. There is no decision to overturn. There is no moment where anybody did anything to her that she can point at. Every individual step was defensible. The diary is a household matter. Patronages get reassigned all the time. Modernization is a legitimate goal. Every one of them on its own is nothing. Assembled, they are an eviction, and there is nothing to sue. It is strategically flawless and personally cold, done to a woman who spent 20 years standing beside his father through things most people would not have survived. And he had a press office send her the news. The public worked most of this out within about a fortnight, and the reaction was not what the palace expected. There was no wave of sympathy for Camilla. That was never going to happen, and nobody in that building thought it would. The memory in this country is long, and her history is not forgotten. There are still a great many people who will never be able to hear her name without hearing another one behind it. But something else showed up instead, and it turned out to be more dangerous to William than sympathy would have been. People could smell the management, the coordinated headlines. The photograph released at the exact moment a difficult story was building. The Queen Consort disappearing from a website without anybody saying a word about it. Ordinary viewers who could not tell you one fact about royal patronage looked at the pattern and understood immediately that they were being handled. And being handled is the one thing a modern audience will not forgive. The monarchy has to look human. The second it starts looking like a corporate communications operation running a rebrand, it loses the only argument it has for existing at all. When you begin treating members of your own family as liabilities to be managed off the books, you are demonstrating in public exactly what you are. Camilla's story is a messy one. It has genuine wrongdoing in it, and endurance, and a kind of redemption most people did not think she deserved and eventually granted her anyway. Erasing that from the record does not make the institution look modern. It makes it look cold. And cold is the accusation this particular family has never once managed to survive cleanly. Underneath all of it runs a calculation nobody involved will ever admit to, and it has a name: Harry. While this restructure was being executed, the younger son was sitting in California as a permanent demonstration of what happens when this family pushes somebody one step too far. He left. He criticized it publicly. He published a memoir in 2023 that took the machinery apart in print. The lesson is still sitting there in plain sight. Push too hard, manage too coldly, and the person you are trying to remove can become the story you can never control again.